What is good? It's your boy Roy, and it's another episode of Sync Gems. Today, we have the part 2 with Phil Lober. We talk about being musically educated versus uneducated. We talk about cultivating curiosity around what you want to be doing. We talk about socializing and how it can be a form of studying, because I admit that I'm not as good of a researcher as a lot of people. We talk about discipline versus motivation and how they play together. And Phil adds a little mind trick in the end that you can do to trick yourself into sitting in front of your computer, sitting in front of your DAW, doing what you need to do. So that's in the end. If y'all want to support the podcast, please go ahead, rate and review it on your platform. Also follow it, because this helps you to know when the next one is coming. Another thing is, I am still offering one-on-one sync coaching sessions. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know that the fastest and most efficient way to elevate in this game is mentorship and community. These are two things that I didn't get in the beginning of my way, but understood how valuable they are. This is why I do one-on-ones. And I love to hear about student success too. I enjoy it almost as much as I enjoy my own success in sync. So I hope to help you on your journey. If that's something you're interested in, just hit me up via socials. And without further ado, my man, Phil Lober.
The right fashion is very subjective. It's very wide. So that's another thing to remember. Where a person who doesn't know any instrument can make a track as good as the people who know all the theory, if not better, because sometimes they can break the rules because they don't know they're there. Whereas somebody who learned something and he's like, no, this is dissonant, or something like that, you know it, and now you cannot unknow it.
Yeah.
And now you're not exploring anymore because you know something.
Oh yeah. But that goes with anything you've practiced. When you're new to something, you're more likely to stumble upon something lucky like that.
Yeah.
There's melodies that are just so good. Like take the Mario theme, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I would never come up with that on piano. I mean, even if let's say that I was just that smart to begin with, I would never come up with anything like that on piano, because the way that it flows is a lot more like an experimental jazz. It's really interesting. And then you have melodies in what's that Kendrick Lamar song, like Humble?
Okay.
Dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's such a simplistic melody that I also wouldn't come up with. Right, because I'm a pianist, so I'm just playing all the time and trying to come up with the fun to play stuff. And that actually goes a little bit back to our overbaking, because overbaking can happen with melodic structure too, and just ideas. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that where there is that quote by, was it Benny Goodman? He was like, learn the rules and forget them so you can just play. I think there's a lot of truth to that, because it is good to learn the rules, because you need to rely on craft. Like, you can't just get lucky every time. If you're not feeling motivated one day, you need craft. You need that. Well, craft is a word in the film composing community. That means like knowing what works or what you can work with, what you have.
You need something to fall back on.
Yeah, and that's like knowledge of chord progressions, or like, oh, this is an emotional scene, so I'm going to put this progression in because I know that's an emotional one.
Yeah.
And then as you do that, you then tinker with it a bit, and you get a little more inspired because you have something going that you can play on top of or edit. So yeah, I would rather be the person who knows the rules versus the one who's just like trying things in music, because it's my job. Would I love to go like try out surfing and then like catch this crazy wave and do a new trick on it? Yeah, that'd be awesome. But that's not my job. That's not something that like pays the bills. That has an objective standard that is set by supervisors. And that when the supervisor standard comes in, the whole conversation about this changes. Because they're you said it is subjective, and it totally is. But we can analyze from a marketing standpoint why it works.
Right.
It's really boring and dehumanizing, but it's true. It's like if you look at tracks that have come out that are like using an alarm for trailer music, you could say like, well, subconsciously, like the human brain is triggered by this alarm sound, and so like that, and it repeats, so it's repetition. And if you go back to tribal forums, like they use repetition, and like you can analyze why things work and resonate with people, and a lot of good supervisors will do that, but especially marketing department leads. Like they're gonna analyze stuff like that. Marketing is all about that, and trailer music is all about marketing.
Yeah.
So it's subjective to the supervisor, but that subjectivity is linked to an objective. This is right for this audience, because of the data that we've gone over. Right? It's like, oh, this is a movie about hip hop artists, so we're gonna use a hip hop track. That's a subjective opinion, but it's objective in the sense of this has worked for hip hop movies in the past.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely an aspect of research. I feel like that I'm definitely not the best at when it comes to sync and to, because people do say like to achieve the success you want in sync, you have to research what's out there. And I don't like the word research, to be honest. I just feel like in the end of the day, I need to go back to what I love and what really inspires me, and then I'll do the research. Because when I love something, when I love a soundtrack, then I'll just naturally research it. Like I'll naturally that's if you think about it. If I think about it as a kid, when I used to really get into something, I would just magically know everything about it after a few weeks. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the phase that has always scared me a little bit, where people are like, yeah, you should research, you should do that, you should do this, you should and that's probably why one of the reasons why it took me a lot of time to kind of like reach a relative place of success, because I didn't know the rules to break, if that makes sense. And what I did, I went the long way, and I just became affiliated with really, really smart people who can tell me, well, that doesn't work. You should do this and this and this and that, because that works in ads, and this, and then I affiliated myself with these smart people, and again, I don't have to do research now, because these people can tell me what works and what not. When you came to my place the other day and you heard a track and you were like, that sounds I told you that I'm passing it on. You told me that sounds pretty mixed to me, and to me it was like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? And so I feel like there's many ways to go about this. I don't think that I went through it the right way per se, in order to achieve a quick success. Yeah. But
I mean, it's trailer music anyway, so nobody goes the right way, because there's no academic course for trailer music.
Right.
I mean, that's like going on your first point, when you're talking about like how when you're interested in something, you'll know everything about it in 3 weeks. We're very much... That's the thing with the artist. It's the gift. It's like the curse and strength, is that we're really based on our feelings, and that can be a weakness in a lot of areas. But in the actual majority of the essence of that, it's a strength, I feel, because it gets the big things over with. It's like, okay, what do I want to do in my entire life? This, like, we're just sure about it. Like, okay, music, done. And at an early age too. Like I was. I don't know when you started, what age, but I think I started when I was 6, and I was like on music in just general, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. you know, and it was never even, actually, I never even said that to myself. I just knew it. And it was never a thought in my mind. It was like, oh, of course I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And in that sense, it's like a marriage, you know, it's like a marriage with no divorce. And because we're so dead set on things, we have this, like, it's almost like a discipline to that worship of music. And so all of our discipline goes towards that thing. And then our discipline doesn't go towards other areas. So I think the trial of a composer is to go with what they're interested in and then find a way to make other things interesting. You know, like, I used to listen to music and I wouldn't even like music that had a drum kit in it. They'd be like, oh, drum kit, no, like, it has to be pure orchestra. Drum kits are cheap. They just do beat. I don't get it. It was very Scrooge McDuck. And then I started to understand, like, oh no. Well, first I listened to orchestral music that had drum kits in it, right? And I was like, okay, that's like Nick Phoenix stuff. Nick Phoenix is super good with combining drum beats with orchestral stuff. And I was like, okay, well, this is cool. Yeah, I like this. Okay, I get it. And then in film scores, they would sometimes go to like random like break beat or something like a DNB kind of thing. And so then it worked for that world, but it was still stubborn thinking. It was still like, well, it's film music, so of course it works. But eventually I started branching out to other genres. Like once a little element gets into the genre that you like, then you explore off into that genre, and then other genres blend into those elements, and then you explore those genres. And yeah, it took me from film music to like Kendrick Lamar, you know? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to learn when you actually branch out and explore different things. But it's because it's so easy for me to say, like, no, just be disciplined. It doesn't matter what you want to do, because the really important things in life are based on discipline, which is so true. Like, if you just get your ass out of bed and just start the project you don't want to do, 30 minutes later you're going to be doing it for like 4 hours. But that's easier said than done. And I think a better, more realistic method for the brains like the ones we have is to find a reason for something else to be interesting. So like, if I'm gonna, like, I'm learning Indonesian now, and you're very good at Indonesian. Like, you've learned, and there's reasons for that, right? There's interesting reasons. And for me, I'm just kind of here temporarily. You're more stationed here for now. And you have a life established here for now. And what I do is I'll go and research like some of the history of the language, or like see how it was established here in Indonesia, and that interests me to learn it more, right? Or I'll just go down and talk to somebody about something interesting in Indonesian. So there has to be some kind of interest in it. Unfortunately, and this is the saddest truth about humanity, is that we're not machines. But it's also a great truth. So I would love to just be able to discipline myself to do other types of music, just in the blink of an eye. But you have to have a reason for it, actually. And yeah. And so like when you said, like, I can be disciplined to do something, and if I'm interested in it, yeah. Like I love learning about Mexican history, you know, but there's other histories where I'm like, oh, it's kind of boring. And I don't research that. And then, so this is a long answer, but the thing that you went to, which was that research can be replaced by just knowing other people who are experts at it. Yeah, actually, that's even better than research, in my opinion. And well, you could say it's a form of research if we really want to broaden the definition of research. But knowing those other people, they're constantly at the front lines. You know, they're beyond that glass barrier. If you know a publisher and your publisher is giving you feedback, that's like a gold mine compared to like some guy's trailer music website from 2003 telling you like, well, it's a 3-act structure. Yeah. You know, so it's good to have those people. It's much better to have those people, actually.
I think it's just like, it's a matter of preference. It's like what scratches your itch best. And for me, academia, school, learning from a page, looking at something and understanding it, has never yielded anything for me. Like I'm not recommending on doing what I've done, but I basically cheated on all my exams, like all of them. My leg was like the Bible because I jotted down all the notes and all that kind of stuff because it just wasn't interesting to me. And to be honest, like funny thing, because I really sucked at Bible enough that I failed it. I went a few years later and learned and wanted to make over for that, like do it over again. And I found the Bible so interesting.
Yeah.
After 3 years of just like wanting to vomit from even seeing it, I found the stories so compelling, so beautiful, so philosophical, so deep, and it connected with my story now.
Yep.
And it actually, like, I feel like the Bible is almost where the hero's journey is pulled from. It's like, the Moses concept.
Yeah, it's
like,
an epic.
Yeah, it's
story.
just like, so I feel like what's the way that I've always been able to get relatively good at things was just to immerse in it and figure out the grooves from there and try to figure it out as fast as I can. And if I cannot, then that's good. But I usually find myself like when there's no other resort. Like if I live in a place where nobody speaks English, I will have to eventually not speak English. Yeah. It's just the way it is. It's just the way that the world works. And I feel like putting myself in the fire in that way has enabled me to learn the language a little bit better than most of the people who are in Indonesia who don't know a word. I know people who are in here for 15 years who know to say hi, thank you, how are you, and that's it. And that's the way I've always been. Also with rapping, I don't know when I really sucked in rapping. I'm sure that there was a place in time where I was really, really fucking bad at it. But I just went to New York to just do my studying. And I got so many people just like laugh at me or tell me like, you're too white, you're too this, you're too that, you're too like so many things. But I was so immersed in it that these things didn't even bother me.
It overpowered the negatives.
Right, because it just like, it was something I was curious about and I wanted to dive into and I wanted to become better at it no matter what. And then like it becomes, there's so much information and data and research about grit, and that's what made people great. Grit made people great. And it is one of the factors. Like you can take a really academically talented person and put him next to a person who's had some really hard upbringing. They both know music. I can tell you straight away who will be a bit more business successful. I'm 99% sure that will be the case, unless the talented guy has a fluke. Right. But if that guy, that talented person, got everything until that point, they got everything easy. Everybody sucked their dick when in high school because they knew a few more licks, jazz licks than other people. Yeah. Suddenly they become this arrogant prick, and the hardworking person just makes a track and just like chips away because that's what they learned. They learned that's how great things are.
It's very tortoise and hare.
And yeah, exactly, tortoise and the hare, and I feel like that's the thing that we've lived on, and that's why I feel like I've sinned in it a lot. Where I've been looking for this magic bullet, like for my whole life. Because of my I've had some hard experiences, but I've had a pretty privileged upbringing, I would say, like very middle class upbringing, and I didn't have anything missing. I had food in my fridge. I got all my medical shit dealt with, and all that kind of stuff. And down when I became a bit more mature, I realized that this was a huge pattern I needed to break, because I realized that I'm looking for a shortcut for everything, everything, because I used to look at my leg when I didn't want to study for the test. I would look at my leg, and I would just like, or I would go to the toilet, hide something. Like I would look for shortcuts always, but it has to stop at a certain point. It has to stop, because people in the end, they want to work with people who want to work.
Yeah.
Want to do what they do, and who are not entitled. And I was super entitled. I feel like that's where anyway, like what you're saying really hits home for me, because this was something I had to establish by myself, you know.
Yeah.
And to realize and to immerse myself, and that's my way of researching. But it's not for everyone. Some people can do really well with just learning from a page.
Well, I think what you told me makes me feel that your mindset is very application based. So like if you're in academia and they're just teaching to teach, then it's just incestual. It's ancestral education. It's like, well, where is that going to lead me to? Do you know what a rail shooter is?
A school shooter in the railway station?
Oh, no. There's something redundant about it. Funny. But no, a rail shooter is like those Jurassic Park games that you play at arcades. So it's where everything's presented to you and you just fire at it. And I find those games to be absolutely just boring, just super pedantic. And I prefer sandbox games. Sandbox games being like Zelda Breath of the Wild or GTA, games where you have a storyline and you can follow that if you want, but you can also take sidetracks to explore this world. There's a thing that happens in nightclubs, which is that like, you know, like a guy will dance with a girl, and some guys are very possessive over the girl that he finds in the club, and he won't let her dance with anyone else. And that creates a lot of tension and friction, and it kind of turns the girl off, to be honest. And then there's guys who will just be like, oh yeah, you can just do whatever you want, I don't care. And then that lets the other person decide, like, oh yeah, okay, I like this guy, I can dance with him. Or not, you know, it gives them the freedom. When we feel too guided by things, it creates an ironic anti-effect to what it's trying to do. If someone says like, look, I have the answer for you, just go through this long tunnel and I'll tell you everything you need to know, there's something really boring about that. There's something that's like, well, I don't want to do that, even though I know what's on the other side is what I need. And that's where discipline comes in. But it doesn't have to come in, right? Because once we're out in the world, then we're able to have our own independent discovery of things. There's an element of ego to it as well, because it's the fact that we've concocted our own cognitive education on something that could possibly make us unique in a way is a motivation too. Like when you're reading the Bible yourself and you're thinking like, okay, this is interesting. Now I have my own just cognitive comprehension of how this works, and I have more freedom and space to really understand this very complex and epic, large-scale story. And then it allows, it's also not just that, it's also like you have the, what is it? It allows you to apply those things in the future as well. So you can take lessons from really any holy book, really, or any book actually, just anything that you're studying on your own, and apply those things to your life. So it not only becomes ontological in its own right, but also becomes phenomenological and pragmatic. But it's all independent from your own independent catalyst. That was a redundant sentence, but yeah, it's you have your own catalyst now, and you're able to use that as your interface. And And because of that, there's a touch of ego to it, but I feel like it's a good thing. It's a healthy ego in the sense of like identity ego. Like, okay, now I can form my own identity with this. And that's something that humans really gravitate towards. And it's something that we have a hard time understanding others on, when like others just want to get through a class, right? Like, you know, let's like just focus on the lesson, man. Like, why are you so bored of this? Like, we just got to get an A on this so we can pass the class. It's like, yeah, sometimes that's not very relatable. You know, sometimes the necessary doesn't feel, it feels like the least necessary thing. And we feel like we're being hidden from another truth. And I think that other truth is what does this mean in the bigger picture, and what does this mean for identity? And so when we study the same things, and that's why I try to encourage my students in the same way. I'm like, okay, like I have the lessons for you, but you have to go practice, and you have to listen to a lot of music yourself. I can happily guide you through these things, but all of my students accelerate most when they take what I've taught them and then go on their own and do their own thing. Because there's something really important about building your identity. When I have a melody, like people say like, oh, that melody sounds super Phil Lober, or this like staccato strings going unrealistically fast, such a Phil Lober thing. I feel very proud. You know, I feel like, damn, okay, so I have some kind of identity. And when I'm writing music and I'm like, I like these, it doesn't feel like me though. It feels like they're my friends, like these melodies, these different motifs. It's like, oh yeah, I know this is a friend of mine. I'm going to use him in the music. And then it becomes part of identity, and that motivates me more to do the music. And so I totally relate when someone says, like, I'm so not motivated to do music. I just started out. I don't have an identity in this. Of course, I understand that it's not as motivating. Like, we can think about, and a good way to relate to that is to, or empathize with it, is to try out a new art and see how well you do with motivation. It's not easy, man. Like, if you're trying to, I'm learning 3D art right now, and I can put some things together and make abstractions, and that can be somewhat of an identity, but the majority of that art is very much like following certain structures and pathways within the animation software's protocol. And that's boring. It's really, really boring. And so, and for some people it isn't, because they know that the end result is something that they would be satisfied with, or at least 80%. So when you're starting out in something, it's a lot like that. Like, and the reason I'm talking about this is because if I were to go back to academia, I would not be as bored by it. I would feel like, oh no, I have an identity in music. And I'm not talking about some people who may know me or not. Not like that kind of identity. Like, it's more like, oh, okay, I understand my sound as it is right now, and I understand my own like conscious relation to the music I write and the experience that I have. I'm settled into that. So I go back to academia and I could be like, okay, I know what to apply these classes towards. You know, it's more writing. You know, I could say, oh yeah, don't use second inversions. Interesting rule. I don't know if I agree with it, but let's try it. Right? I can do that. Whereas like someone who hasn't really found their own, and I'm trying to be really careful with the wording here, because I wouldn't say find your own sound in that sense. Like someone who hasn't found their own comfortability or being accustomed to writing music, then yeah, I feel like they'd think, well, what's this being applied to? Like, what am I in this class for? So, yeah.
Checking that it's still rolling. Rolling still. So, okay, yeah, I feel like we've covered quite a bit here. Before we wrap up, what do you think is something you want to leave people with? What's something that you see a lot of maybe your students or people who come up to you and look for what you got? look for that silver bullet, look for that placement, look for that
The red hair.
Yeah, the red hair. They're trying to get that red hair. And what would you say to these people?
I mean, I'm constantly dissatisfied with myself, so that's the reason why I'm constantly writing and trying to improve. So the straight answer would be a little bit like, why are you going for this anyway? But let's just skip that part and say, like, okay, you want to be on this path. Okay. I see a lot of my students not a lot of them, but there's some of them that don't put in the proper time to really research, like, what makes a good quality hit sound, for instance. That's always like the number one issue with my students. And it's also a very difficult thing to get right at first, so that's understandable. And sometimes they just won't put in the time. And I think if you're going to leave with anything, time management is probably the most important skill in the entire universe as a conscious human being. Like, if you're sentient, all those sentient listeners out there, time management, absolutely. Because you can fit anything into your schedule, right? Like, have you ever been lying down and just looking at Facebook shorts for like 30 minutes? That's 30 minutes to listen to some hit sounds. It's less than that it takes. You could like listen to a really good trailer track, and in like that first 10 seconds of that track, be like, with active listening, be like, oh, okay, interesting. How much punch is there in that hit? How much bass is there? Is it cornering around 60 hertz, 80 hertz? And if you don't like to think in numbers like that, that's fine too. Just use your ears. And a lot of my students have this thing where they'll set a certain amount of time to work during the day. And not trying to sound counterintuitive to what I just said, but some of my students will say, like, I'm going to work like 4 hours on trailer music every day. And I'm like, you're going to totally fail that. Like, nobody just does that, because that's just asking to burn out super quickly at a really new skill and a new experience, and like that doesn't work. And so what I do is I tell people, set minimums, don't set maximums. Like, don't be like, okay, I'm going to work a maximum of like 4 hours. Okay. No, you set a minimum of like 10 minutes. Spend 10 minutes, because that's what it takes to really get yourself into it. And I've done that with one student. I've said, like, okay, how about you just work for 30 minutes instead of 2 hours? And they ended up working for like 5 hours a day with that minimum, because it's like that academia thing. It's like, when you know you have to sit down and do it, it's boring, because we already know the end result. And curiosity is creativity. So if you kill the curiosity by setting an absolute time block, then you kill the creativity. That's my advice for newcomers into the genre. If you're experienced in trailer music, you can obviously know that, like, okay, if I put 4 hours into this, I can come up with something. But still, it's counterproductive, because we don't want to think like that. Like, we want to see like what comes up, and we don't want to feel like our schedule is so full. And there's people out there who, they're like, well, I have this job I have to do, and I have this thing, and when I get home, I'm really tired. And it's like, what's the least you can do then? Right? The capacity of human productivity is insane. Like, there's so much that we can do just in one day. And a lot of us are just addicted to our smartphones, or our nicotine, or our weed, or whatever we got. And I speak from experience with that. So I understand that it's hard to get over, like, just sitting around in your bed and watching Facebook shorts or whatever. But the reward from breaking away from that for just 10% of the time it takes, it's amazing. You know, it takes like 5 minutes to just listen to one good trailer track and then make your own thoughts about it and apply those to your music. So every little minute, every little second can be spent towards accelerating your career and accelerating your goals. So, yeah.
Hell yeah. Are you still taking on students?
Yeah.
Cool. So how can people hit you up?
Yeah, I mean, they can always email me, phillober@gmail.com, or they can hit me up on Instagram, Music of Phil, or they can hit me up on Facebook. So that's okay too. YouTube now doesn't allow messaging, so can't do that one. But
they can check your out there.
They can check the live streams, and I'm shifting my live streams over to a Patreon that I'm going to be creating.
Hey.
Because that Patreon's going to include some other stuff, like some sample stuff and some giveaways, but mainly the live streams on there. And yeah, man. So that's how you can reach me if you want to beat me.
Sick.
Yo, how cool is that? How cool is Phil? Very. I'll answer my own question. Thank y'all for listening. Remember to rate and review the podcast. Follow it on the platform you're listening to it on. And also, if you want to spend some one-on-one time with me to get your sync career to the next level, hit me up on my site, on LinkedIn, on IG, and we can talk further. Until the next one. Peace.